So I love tournament arcs in anime. So often they can provide us a fun distraction from the plot, or can have the opposite effect and supplement the overall story. Trying to guess the outcomes of tournament matches and how exactly they will come to pass is very exciting. At this point, I've seen a decent amount of these tournament arcs, so I want to talk about my favorites of all time. Keep in mind, this is my opinion and not an argument for them being better than other tournament arcs. Before we begin, I want to set out the criteria for what I consider to be a tournament arc. Firstly, the tournament does not have to be fighting or martial arts. Any event that is organized and overseen by some sort of higher power is fair game. The contestants can be solo or in teams, and the contestants have to spend the majority of the tournament competing against each other, and there's usually gotta be a prize of some sort. Also keep in mind that there may have been good tournament arcs that I didn't see, so if you want to know what I have and have not seen, refer to my anime list, the link is in the description. Now that I've laid out the rules, let's go. Number 10, the Winter Cup. At number 10 is the awesome tournament that capped off Kuroko no Basket in spectacular fashion. The other tournaments to this point were all nice, but the Winter Cup was an ending befitting the final arc of this anime. We got a large pool of new teams to explore and get attached to, or hate. We got the introduction of the ominous and extremely talented Rakuzan, and we got a lot of the same hype and hijinks that we were used to up to that point, including that of the best player. On the gameplay side of things, we got some of the most amazing moments in the series, like one of my favorite animated moments of all time, in the duel between Kagami and Aomine. We got tons of awesome zone moments and some nice backstories as well. The reason it ranks so low is mostly due to its predictability. Regardless of all the cool new teams that are introduced to us, we knew the four major schools, Seiren, Shutoku, Rakuzan, and Kaijo, were going to be the final four. The only reason Toho didn't make it was because they faced Seiren in the first round. Even in the semifinals, after all the hyping up we got of them, we knew that Rakuzan was not going to lose their match to Shutoku, and it was quite obvious that they were being billed as the ominous uphill battle for our main team Seiren to battle in the finals. This was partly made up for by the fact that the final between Seiren and Rakuzan was very good, albeit predictable like the aforementioned matches. Either way, regardless of the ridiculousness of the series, as a fan of both anime and basketball, I thoroughly enjoyed this arc. Number 9, the Yagyu arc. So I've talked about this arc quite a bit in 2 separate videos, so I'll keep this brief. This tournament pitted 2 teams of 6 to try and destroy the plates the other team wears on their person. This little tournament is great because it introduces one of the series' best characters, has great development for Shinpachi, has some important dialogue in regards to gender norms and relations, and has some nice fights. It ranks only number 9 because of its half comedic, half dramatic nature, which in the context of Gintama is perfectly fine, but in the context of tournament arcs in general, can make it a little less hype. The other factor is that it was kind of one-sided. 3 members of Kyubei's team didn't get a single elimination, and Team Shinpachi won the tournament with 2 members remaining. Nonetheless, I think it's a very underrated Gintama arc, and it remains one of my favorites in the whole series. Number 8. Jake's Deadly Matches. This entry comes from my favorite superhero anime in recent years. I like this tournament because it was basically what I wanted out of the Cell games from Dragon Ball Z. Jake Martinez put the entire island of Stern Build on hold with the threat of destruction, openly challenging all of the heroes to a fight one by one. It was initially posed as all 7 top heroes fighting Jake, but only 4 ended up getting to fight. The 4 fights we did get were mostly really good at establishing the tone of this tournament. Sky High, the number 1 ranked hero, flew in and soundly lost. The best hero being taken out first greatly increased the sense of hopelessness in Stern Build as the people watched on. The ensuing battle with Wild Tiger, while similarly one-sided, exposed an opening that could potentially defeat Jake, before Barnaby showed up after that to exploit that opening and save the city. The arc was intense and the fights were good. The only major issue for me was that Rock Bison didn't get a proper fight and was just clowned immediately. Nobody was expecting him to win, but it would have been nice to see him get a proper fight like the other participants. And it would have been nice if at least 1 or 2 more people got to go in there and fight Jake, namely Dragon Kid or Fire Emblem. Despite this, Jake's Deadly Matches were really hype and might have been my favorite arc in all of Tiger and Bunny. Number 7, the Hunter Exam. So, despite the Heaven's Arena tournament having my favorite fight in all of Hunter x Hunter, I actually enjoyed the Hunter Exam way more. For me, it was such a good way to introduce the world of Hunter x Hunter as well as the characters. By starting us off with the Hunter Exam, we're introduced to the social structure and atmosphere of the show's world, since the characters are coveting a hunter license which gives them distinct privileges over regular people. And by putting the characters in these challenges, their personalities backstories and motives are slowly unraveled, but not completely as to let the characterization progress in future arcs, but it's just enough to feel like a perfect appetizer for the hype to come. I also loved the variations of challenges, from cooking to obstacle courses, to puzzles to straight up fighting, and it was always exciting trying to see what Togashi would pull out next in the Hunter exam. Number 6. The 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament. The final arc of the original Dragon Ball anime, there were very few better ways it could have ended. Stating the obvious, we got a lot of great fights, and in the context of the whole series, it served as a last hurrah for some characters who would soon become irrelevant for almost the entirety of Dragon Ball Z. And in this aspect I'm kind of biased because I'm one of the fans who started on Dragon Ball Z before tracking back to the original Dragon Ball afterwards. So it was nice to see Krillin, Tien Shinhan, and Yamcha get a few cool moments before they faded from the forefront. Also, I'm not really sure how other fans feel about this, but an Evil Piccolo was kinda really cool. The Shen hijinks was great, one of my favorite attacks, the Mafuba, was utilized during the tournament, and Piccolo vs Goku in the finals was one of the best fights in the entire series. Number 5. The 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament. So the tournament right before the one I just mentioned was easily the best of the 4 tournaments between Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. That fight had several of the characters we are familiar with kicking ass and being awesome, such as Goku, Krillin, and Roshi, and although he was introduced in the arc before, this arc was the true emergence of Tien Shinhan as a force of awesomeness in the series, albeit initially evil like Piccolo in the tournament after. Almost every fight between major characters was phenomenal. Tien vs Yamcha was good and had one of the most brutal yet memorable moments in the breaking of Yamcha's leg. Krillin vs Goku is my favorite fight in the whole series alongside Piccolo vs 17 and Goku vs Jiren. Roshi vs Tien was good, and Tien's eventual disillusionment with the Crane Hermit's dirty methods was nice to see. And the final fight between Goku and Tien was just amazing, and the sudden killing of Krillin at the end of the arc was very memorable, even if it was sad. With it also being important to the dispelling of ideas that Goku is unloving and selfish, just judging by his reaction. Number 4. The Tournament of Power. Okay, so I promise this is the end of the Dragon Ball barrage on this list, but I feel like this tournament deserves a lot of credit for what it did for the Dragon Ball world. The first major factor I want to mention is that it brought Krillin, Tien, and Roshi back into the fold after being nearly irrelevant in the entirety of Dragon Ball Z. It also brought back Android 17 in a huge way, and Android 18 was fighting again. Gohan got to be a badass after spending most of Super on the sidelines, and another aspect of my own bias once again, I got to see more Piccolo awesomeness. And also, the tournament produced arguably the best version of Frieza yet. Aside from bringing more underutilized characters back into the fold, the tournament vastly expanded the Dragon Ball world with the introduction of several universes. Yes, some of these universes were more interesting than others, but as a whole we got a whole host of awesome new characters with unique personalities, designs, and abilities. There were also lots of memorable fights, my favorites being Frost vs Roshi, shout out to even more Mafuba attacks, Goku vs Kefla, and 17 and Frieza vs Toppo, as well as both rounds of Goku vs Jiren. The arc did suffer from relatively slow sections, particularly the start, before really heating up between episode 107 to 116, and then slowing down again until episode 122, all the way until the end, where the tournament once again became spectacular. Regardless, this tournament expanded the Dragon Ball world, redeemed several characters, and introduced a bunch of new cool ones, and provided us with some of the most memorable moments in series history. Considering Dragon Ball Super just ended recently, I have a lot to say about the tournament, but for the sake of not overwhelming you all with Dragon Ball, I'll move on. Number 3. The 4th Holy Grail War. So this one is a masterclass right out of one of my favorite anime of all time. To put it simply, every character involved in this Holy Grail War, every master and servant, was fascinating. Every fight was amazing and animated extremely well, and even the dialogue managed to captivate me to a near equal extent as the fighting, and in a few cases more so. A prime example being the exchange between Saber, Ryder, and Gilgamesh. Also, for someone who started watching Fate with Fate Zero, this series marks the debut of my 2 favorite Fate characters, Saber and Iskander. And it also had one of my favorite fights of all time in Kotomine vs Kiritsugu, as well as amazing voice acting in both English and Japanese. Number 2. The Dark Tournament. Man, where do I even start with this one? Yu Yu Hakusho's Dark Tournament might be the greatest martial arts tournament arc in anime that I've ever seen. We got a huge cast of interesting and well-designed characters, too numerous to go through. The fights were animated extremely well for their time, with most of it holding up by today's standards. Every member of Team Urameshi got a chance to shine in individual bouts. The voice acting was amazing in English. I haven't listened to the Japanese dub, so I can't speak for it, and the tournament was also chock full of development and backstory for the various characters. And the final matchup between Yusuke and Toguro was amazing. Number 1. The Bridge of Life. So this is just one of many points I would throw out there to convince anyone who hasn't seen Kaiji to give it a shot. For those of you who have seen Kaiji, you all know what I'm talking about. Firstly, this arc completely took me by surprise when you consider how relatively tame the Espoir arc was. Also, the competitors in question had to push each other off the steel beams to try and attain higher cash prizes for completing the first bridge. Yeah, just the first bridge. Suddenly we're told there's a second bridge where death is guaranteed if you fall off. The stakes went from possibly being beat up and put into labor to once again taking physical damage and or dying. Given the competitors weren't competing in the second bridge, but the stakes were still very high and it was part of the greater event, so I feel like it counts. Let's not forget the beams on the second bridge being electrically charged. The emotion of this arc was also unreal. Despite being in the comfort of my own home, I felt like I was standing up there with them, like I was gonna fall. I got legitimately worried. The angles, the faces, the inner monologues, the competitors trying to comfort each other, Tonigawa goading on the sidelines, all of this added to the sense of real stress that somehow reached me right here in the real world. This arc ceased to just be an entertaining concept put to animation, but a test of my tolerance for misery and stress. That may seem like a bad thing, but that just signifies how well this arc was written, directed, shot, and composed, making me feel like I'm gonna get pushed off myself for just watching this madness. And it managed to do this without any fighting or any martial arts. Just a bunch of guys walking from point A to point B on a straight steel beam. Not to mention the twist at the end, and the unexpected transition to the equally as amazing E-card arc. And getting into some spoiler territory now, the tragic and shocking losses of Sahara and Ishida added to the misery and made it clear that you weren't safe just because you were an important character. And this is a weird factor, but the wild card that was Sahara added to how much I liked this arc. So as far as we know up to that point in the story, Sahara is just some dude that happens to be good at tricking people. He introduces himself as some thrill seeker and joins along to the tie-eye building to participate in these games. But as far as we know, Sahara is not in debt. He's under no obligation to be there or to participate, but once he realizes the absolutely fucked up things that they're trying to make them do, he participated anyway. This is especially shocking on the second bridge. Again, the man is under no obligation to stick around, he's not in debt, the stakes don't seem to be that high for him, but he went with it anyway. I just ended up asking myself, why? Why did Sahara participate? Why is he putting himself through this? What did he even die for? And these questions are never answered in the anime, and it adds this sense of mystery and craziness to the arc that's both sad and fascinating. So anyway, that's my list. Do you agree with it? Do you feel like the placements should have been different? Did I miss one that deserved a place on the list? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.